Kameranya tidak menghadap ke muka. Speakers and participants, the honorable speakers and participants, good afternoon, everyone. Today we are having the second session of the presentation of the International Conference on Social and Islamic Studies held by Islamic State University, Alauddin in Makassar. Today we have our speakers. As this is a social and Islamic Studies International Conference, of course we have the international speakers here. We have Professor Najma Mosa from the Cape Town University in South Africa. Please welcome Professor Najma Musa. Professor Najma Musa has written several publications. The forthcoming chapter in 2022 is Constitutional Implication of Homosexual Sexual Orientation, Homosexuality, Same-Sex Civil Marriage, and Nikah for Association, Inheritance Right, and Testamentary Freedom. I think this title is very crucial and then very updated, and the issue is very current. And then also Professor Najma Mosa has written several books. The book is The Mystery of Apostasy of Sheikh Yusuf of Makassar Alleged Grandchildren. So this is related to, what we have known, most of people here in Makassar about Sheikh Yusuf. It's very popular. I think there will be very interesting question related to this issue. And there are several articles also and several other publications. And today, I think Professor Najma Musa will share to us a very valuable knowledge, and this is a very, very good opportunity to listen her thought and also her idea about the current issue. So we welcome Professor Najma Musa. Wow. Professor Najma Musa, can you hear us here from Indonesia?
Yes, Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Can you hear me?
Yes, it's clear.
Okay.
What time is there in Cape Town now, Professor?
It is almost 8 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, so good morning.
Yeah, Assalamualaikum.
Now we are here, it's a quarter to 2 o'clock, and the weather is very fine.
Yeah, we are also having a very windy weather in Cape Town, and also load shedding. So we are lucky that I can be speaking now, and we are not experiencing any load shedding at the moment.
Okay, now we are going to listen to your presentation, and this time is yours. So participant here, Professor Najma Musa.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you for making the place was named Makassar after his place of birth in Indonesia. So we have a Makassar with a K in Indonesia and a Makassar with a C in Cape Town. So there are two Makassars, okay? So I'm going to show you a clip now of the real site of Sheikh Yusuf right here in Cape Town.
Professor Naima, we are sorry, we got a technical problem here, so we are fixing it now.
Okay.
So I heard that you have a Makassar town also in South Africa.
Yes, where Sheikh Yusuf, when he came to South Africa, he stayed here for 5 years and then he died in South Africa. So after he died, the place where he was buried and lived it's named Makassar after Sheikh Yusuf.
Okay.
Yes.
So is it a big city?
No, it's in Cape Town. It's a small, a little farming area in Cape Town. There's still a large Muslim community at the moment, and there is a shrine built at the place where Sheikh Yusuf was buried. We have the shrine reconstructed. In 1927, we had a whole reconstruction of the site of Sheikh Yusuf. So we see that he has been. Similar to what you have in Indonesia, we have a similar shrine to Sheikh Yusuf in Cape Town.
Wow.
So when Sheikh Yusuf came to South Africa, the Dutch moved him far away from the city center because so that he cannot be a threat or he cannot meet passing ships, for example. So the Makassar area is part of what we call surrounded by beach, by sea, but it's called the False Bay. The False Bay. It's a very treacherous waters and ships don't come into that area.
Oh.
So the Dutch put Sheikh Yusuf there because he could not meet people coming to Cape Town, so he was isolated and he was held in isolation because he was a political exile.
Oh. Did Sheikh Yusuf coming to Makassar alone, or did he bring his family?
Yes, Sheikh Yusuf was the only political exile that came to South Africa with a large entourage of 49 people. So he came with his family. He had 12. He had, for example, his 2 wives were with him. One was Sharifa Karakonto Khadija. She was the daughter of the Sultan, and he had another wife with him. And he also, before Sheikh Yusuf came to Cape Town, he was exiled to Sri Lanka in Ceylon. So Colombo. So when he was there, he also married a concubine. We say he took on another, had another wife there, you know. So when he came to the Cape, he had 4 wives. 2 wives were from Indonesia, and he also had a concubine from Sri Lanka. So we see there were 4 wives, there were 12 children, 14 children, 5 daughters, and 7 sons. And he had 12 followers with him. So 12 followers were friends. We were also probably people that helped him in his political fight. They were students. They could have been people that helped him when he was in the struggle against the Dutch in Indonesia. So when he came here, so they make up 30 people. Then there were 19 left over. So they were not all slaves. He also had some slaves with him, but it could have been his sons-in-laws, daughters-in-laws, and grandchildren that were with him, and also the children of the other 12 followers. So people say he came with 12 imams to the Cape, but that is not true because some of them were women as well. So we know that he came with 49 people. So he had like a whole congregation with him, and he was allowed to practice Islam in private, but he could not propagate Islam here because there was a death penalty. If he was to do that, he would be punished by death, you know. So the Dutch were very strict, and they had very strict laws in place. So Sheikh Yusuf was the only political exile who came with such a large following with him. So they had lived in Makassar, in Cape, and they had lived in various little houses there, you know. So that place is still existing today.
Wow, that's amazing. I think there will be many questions. I myself have a lot of questions regarding the descendant of Sheikh Yusuf in South Africa, but now the technical problem is fixed. So we will hear to your presentation
Okay,
from the
inshallah.
video.
Inshallah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum everybody. Thank you for making the time. So after Sheikh Yusuf died there, the place was also named Makassar after his place of birth in Indonesia. So we have a Makassar with a K in Indonesia and a Makassar with a C in Cape Town. So there are 2 Makassars, okay? So I'm going to show you a clip now of the 2 Makassars. This is the burial site of Sheikh Yusuf right here in Cape Town. Okay, so do you notice the Sheikh Yusuf's Kramat in Cape Town is very quiet? Okay, during Maulid, the month of Maulid, then people normally visit the Kramat, but for the rest of the year, or unless it's a special occasion, the Kramat will be busy. So today I'm going to dedicate my presentation to the late Haji Sulaiman Shah Mohammed. I don't know if you've heard of him, but I'm going to show you a picture of him. This is him. He was a very curious and a visionary man. In 1927, he generously sponsored the reconstruction of Sheikh Yusuf's Kramat, the shrine that you see here, so that generations of South Africans would remember him. And so this is what we have. And as a result of him building that, reconstructing the Kramat, he also had commissioned research. He paid for archival research. He paid researchers to do some research on Sheikh Yusuf. So he was the first person then in South Africa to do so, and probably all the research that follows, that was the basis of their research as well. So this man in 1927, he had a passion for traveling, and he also married at the Cape, and so I dedicate this to him because we forget, because he had the vision to rebuild that Kramat. Because the person I'm going to talk about today, a reverend, when he saw the Kramat, it was only a pile of stones, you know, and we could have could easily have forgotten that, and people after that had kept that product alive there in place. So now my presentation, I'm going back to the title of my presentation. You will see I titled it the history. So it's not the her story now, this time it's the he story. So the history of Sheikh Yusuf of Makassar through the pen of a reverend. This reverend was Reverend Francois Valentine. So I'm going to show you the story of Sheikh Yusuf through the pen and through the writings of this reverend. So I'm taking a different angle and I'm showing you something new. And what I'm also going to do is to respond to critics of my book, because my book has already been published and it has been subject to criticism. So I'm going to respond to that critics. So what my book basically tells you is all about two high-profile Indonesian exiles, political exiles. They were Sheikh Yusuf of Makassar and the Raja or the King of Tambora. So Makassar is a busy port city where ships load or unload on Indonesia's Sulawesi Island. And that is also, as I indicated to you, the birthplace of Sheikh Yusuf. So Tambora is a small kingdom on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi, Sumbawa, over which the Raja was ruled as a king. So these are two political exiles. So my book tells you all about these separate and isolated states with their families at the Cape at different locations. So Sheikh Yusuf lived in Fora, in Makassar and Fora, near Fora, and the Raja lived at the governor's estate, the then governor's estate, at his wild farm called Vergelegen in Somerset West. So this was during a period of Dutch colonialism, Dutch occupation of both countries of South Africa and Indonesia in the late 17th century, so the late 1600s. So until my book was published, we knew little about their stay at the Cape, because the Dutch did not keep detailed records of their stay at the Cape, their day-to-day stay. Nor, strangely enough, could anything be found that was written by Sheikh Yusuf or the Raja. Now remember, these two people were very educated people, but they were nothing. We couldn't find any documentation that they left behind. Some of you may never even have heard of the Raja of Tambora. So in recent interviews, radio interviews, and talks that I tell you about the book, why I wrote the book, I tell you about its three main themes, and I also tell you about its central argument. But today I'm going to follow a different approach. I'm going to treat you with extra information, not necessarily detailed in my book, in further support of my central argument. So what is my central argument? So the local scholars argue that the Raja of Tambora married a daughter of Sheikh Yusuf at the Cape. And we know for sure that years later, after the Raja died at the Cape, all his Muslim children apostatized. They converted to Christianity. In other words, they became murtad, right? So they also married Christian spouses. So the central argument of my book is that it cannot be proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the Raja's wife was Sheikh Yusuf's biological daughter, and therefore that their children who turned murtad were the grandchildren of Sheikh Yusuf. So that is basically the central argument of my book. Everything I write in the book is about that, refuting that argument. So what happened in my book evoked both positive reviews and negative criticism. So the late Muhammad Karan, may his soul rest in peace, he told me that clearing Sheikh Yusuf's family name from the taint of apostasy was something he always wanted to do, to write about, and that he was so very happy that I was going to do so. So some local critics of my book have published responses to it. For example, and I'm going to name them here today, okay? For example, Ibrahim Salih, an independent South African historian, he published a response on a platform for sharing academic research called academia.edu. Right? The second person was Mansell Ufam. He was a researcher specializing in South African colonial history. He also published a response on the website called WordPress. So today I will formally respond to these publications during my presentations. So I highlight some aspects of the story of these two families by looking at passages in two books, a travel diary and a book written by a Dutch Calvinist minister or a priest called Francois Valentine. Both these books are written in Dutch, so I give you English translations of passages. So I do so more or less in a chronological timeline. So since Sheikh Yusuf is the main character or the protagonist of my book, I focus on him and I focus on the book that Francois Valentine wrote because it contains more information about Sheikh Yusuf. So I want to show you a picture of the Reverend Francois Valentine, so we know what we're talking about. There we go. So this is Francois Valentine. Okay, now you can have a nice look at him, how well he was dressed, and this was the Reverend. I'm going to tell you about the Reverend Francois Valentine now. So he was employed, as Sheikh Shahid was talking about, this big corporation, the Dutch East India Company, or the VOC, right? The Dutch, or we say the Netherlands East Indies, was a Dutch colony consisting of what is now Indonesia. So when you talk about Indonesia, you say the East Indies, right? So its capital was called Batavia, and now it's known as Jakarta, right? In Indonesia. Islam was its majority religion, and it was formed from the nationalized trading post of the Dutch East India Company, the VOC. So the VOC was established in 1602 as a chartered company whose primary goal was to trade with material goods. But soon, the VOC got involved with trading with slaves and colonization. So the VOC had many dominions, right, under its control, under its occupation. And these included Ceylon, which is now called Sri Lanka, and the Cape of Good. And Sheikh Yusuf was exiled from East Indies or Indonesia to Sri Lanka and then to the Cape. So to both of these dominions, whereas the Raja of Tambora was exiled only to the Cape. So Francois Valentine, he was employed by the VOC. He could speak the Malay language. He was a Dutch man. He was sent from the Netherlands to Indonesia, where I told you Islam was a dominant religion, and his job was to preach and spread Christianity in the Malay language to the Indonesians. So he was employed in Indonesia for 15 years, right, over 2 stays. Now, at the beginning of his first stay in Indonesia in 1686, he hears all about Sheikh Yusuf's capture from the people who captured him, from the horse's mouth, right? And at that point in 1683, when he hears this, Sheikh Yusuf was already exiled from Indonesia for 3 years, right? So therefore, Francois Valentine never met Sheikh Yusuf. After a gap of 10 years, he in the Netherlands, returns back to Indonesia for his second stay, and he makes a stopover visit at the Cape, because at the time the Cape was a midway refreshment station between Indonesia and the Netherlands. So he stops there and he makes a visit and at the Cape, and during his stay there, he visits the grave of Sheikh Yusuf in Makassar near Fora, and he meets the Raja of Tambora and his wife at Vergelegen, the governor's wine estate. Okay, so he meets them there. Now he wrote about all these events: the capture of Sheikh Yusuf, his visit to the grave, and the meeting with the Raja of Tambora. At first he wrote about it in his travel diary. So I'm going to show you a picture of his travel diary. This is his travel diary, all in Dutch. Okay. So now I'm going to look at his, show you a picture of his book. This is his book. It's all in Dutch. Remember, there's nothing in English, and it consisted. So after he left the employment of the VOC in the Netherlands, he returned to in Indonesia. He returns to the Netherlands. He's retired now, right? And he's there for good. And during this time, he writes his famous opus magnum, right? Several volumes of it, a multi-volume work, and in English we will translate that as Old and New East Indies. East Indies, Indonesia, right? And it was published in 1726. While Valentine's book is regarded by some scholars as a foundational text in the history of Dutch colonization in the Cape Colony in South Africa, other scholars point out that large parts of it was plagiarized. Okay, so he took other people's information and passed it over as his own. So I'm not going to talk too much about that, but what this book's contain, it comprises its own notes, it comprises observations, got pictures in there, and he also refers to his diary. So remember, he's got two books, the diary that he writes as he travels to and from the places that he goes to. So now his travel diary was also published in 1726. So his travel diary and his personal accounts in his travel diary and books are elevated by people like Ibrahim Sari, for example, as a status to the status of primary sources. So what do we as Muslims regard as primary sources? The Quran and the Sunnah. That is our primary sources, right? So now I'm going to tell you the story of Sheikh Yusuf in a chronological timeline. But before I do that, I want to show you two little maps, right? I want to show you the map of two maps. This map, this I took from Sarah Joppi's thesis. I want to show you, you can see if you look at this map, there's Indonesia, right? On the right hand side. All these places on this map is places that Sheikh Yusuf visited. Can you see in his own country? When he went to, before he was sent to Colombo in Sri Lanka, he went to India, he went to Damascus in Syria, Medina, Makkah. He even is said to have gone to Turkey. That was the well-traveled man I'm talking about here. Okay, and then he was taken from Indonesia, stayed to Colombo, and went back to the tip of Africa here at the bottom. So that is all the places that Sheikh Yusuf went to. So now we can just show you a picture of the Raja of Tambora. Where's Tambora? I told you it's a kingdom in Sumbawa. There's Tambora. Those little places you see in yellow, Dompu, Bima, those are the places that cause trouble for the Raja, and that causes exile. You may travel there, and that causes him to be exiled to South Africa. So these are two different places, right? Two different people, but I'm going to show you now the link between the two of them. So now I'm going to tell you Sheikh Yusuf's story in a timeline, a chronological timeline, through the pen of the Reverend, okay? So we're going to look at his diaries and his books, right? And before I do that, we're going to talk about Sheikh Yusuf. He was born in Makassar. He was born in Makassar in Indonesia around 1626 or 1627. We don't know which year exactly, okay? So as a young man, age 17, 18, I don't know who's 17, 18 in this audience, but can you imagine how young Sheikh Yusuf was, right? He left home to study Islam and Shafi jurisprudence in those many countries I was telling you about. He traveled to those many countries, including Makkah, right? By the time he returned home after 20 years, he was an alim, a Sufi saint of many tariqas. He was a Hafiz of the Quran and a Haji, right? By the time he returned home. Later, he was also the author of many books. However, when he returned home, he could not return to Makassar, his birthplace, because it was under Dutch occupation. So I'm going to show you a picture. This is what I got from the family of Sheikh Yusuf. He was about 40 years old at this time, just about the time that he would have returned from his travels. And he was with some people who got back with Sheikh Yusuf on the first picture. I don't think we've seen a picture like that of Sheikh Yusuf before. So now I'm going to talk about Sheikh Yusuf's capture in 1683. Remember I told you about Valentine? He was told all about his capture, right? I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. So how did he get captured? So when he came back to Makassar, he couldn't go to Makassar. He couldn't stop it and stay in Makassar. So he was invited by the Sultan and to stay. This man became his father-in-law later. And he went to stay in Bantam on the island of Java. Where he lived for the next 16 years. He married actually two of the Sultan's daughters, but I'm not going to go into that now, right? But he stayed here until 1618, when the Sultan's son sided with the Dutch against his own father, and therefore a long battle ensued. This is what led to Sheikh Yusuf's capture. So Sheikh Yusuf led a guerrilla struggle, and he sided with the old Sultan. He led a the struggle against the company. So Sheikh Yusuf turned a freedom fighter. When he put down his pen, remember he by that time had also authored many books. You will see these books have been translated in South Africa. So he picked up his sword in defense of the country that was unlawfully occupied by the Dutch. So we are fortunate here to have Kami Kamadin, who also studies the history of slavery in the Cape Colony. And Uncle Kami is here in the audience. Uncle Kami, you should be sitting on the stage, please. Right? So he actually calls Sheikh Yusuf a 17th century Mandela. And that is such a very good description. Okay? So after evading captures for so long, so Sheikh Yusuf managed to outbox the Dutch and they couldn't capture him for about 2 years, right? In 1683, he was eventually tracked down in Bantam and forced into surrender by a VOC official called Van Happel, Captain Van Happel. He promised Sheikh Yusuf pardon and he pretended to be a Muslim, right? He could speak and write Arabic. And the Dutch captured Sheikh Yusuf for his anti-Netherlands activities and brought him to Batavia, now in Java, which was now Jakarta, and the company's headquarters in the East Indies, which is Indonesia. In 1686, Francois Valentine, the reverend that we're talking about, he met Captain Van Appel in Jepara, right? A town in the province of Central Java, Indonesia. In the inn, they were sleeping in the same place. They were staying overnight in the same place. And there he writes in his book, right, that Van Appel told him in great detail, this is his words, about Sheikh Yusuf's capture and his Van Appel's role in Sheikh Yusuf's capture, which was 3 years earlier before that. When this Van Appel was still a lieutenant in the army, but now he was a captain. So now I'm going to show you what exactly Francois Valentine wrote, and you can see this. So I'm going to be talking a bit long, right? But after today, you will know all about Sheikh Yusuf, because I'm also responding to my critics now. So I'm going to show you this chapter. So you can read it, and I will also read it. So they are maneuvered now, Van Happel. I don't show you everything here, but they got him from the one side, east and the west, or whatever. They got him from both sides, and then they cornered him in the middle. Right? That's how they got him. So they outmaneuvered, and they fought Sheikh Yusuf. And what Valentine says, they captured all these females. Al zijn weven gevangen kregen. Several of his men who still offered resistance took their lives, and some were cut in half from trees, threatening them all if they did not surrender. And there were 200 of them if they were not going to surrender. And then hearing more closely where he was, now that he was cornered, Lieutenant Van Happel, who was a linguist, was sent to him. Coming to Sheikh Yusuf in Moorish robes, the long robes that the Arabs wear, and having very good knowledge, not only of the Malay language, but also of the Arabic letter, which he wrote very well, and having of all the customs and manners of the Moors, pretended to be an Arab by birth and a believer. What is a believer? A Muslim, right? He convinced him by various proofs. Now, what is a proof that the person is a Muslim? The Shahada, right? That would be the Shahada. He could have said the Kalima, but who? What do we know? We don't know. And writings, and that would be writings in Arabic, right? Said that he had been imprisoned, as Van Happel said, he had been imprisoned by the Dutch, but that he had been treated very well by them, whereupon he not only advised Sheikh Yusuf to surrender, but also assured him that he would be treated very well. Then he, Sheikh Yusuf, handed over his kris, which was his dagger. They all wore the daggers. And he was fighting a war now. Went with him and came to Batavia, which is now the headquarters. But against his expectation, was sent to the Cape of Good Hope, where in 1705 I saw his grave. So this is what Valentine writes, right? So now Professor Dangor, who wrote the biography on Sheikh Yusuf, right? Dangor relates in his book, and Dangor is also very critical of my alternative view. He in fact told me that I'm not providing a convincing argument and that he is not alone in this. So today I'm giving you the argument and you decide, right? So he said in his book, on the basis of his sources, that it was either only one of Sheikh Yusuf's wives, for whom he guesses a name for this wife, or one of his daughters by that wife that was sold. He writes that Manapo used this daughter as bait and lure and sweet talk Sheikh Yusuf to surrender. Daniel's version is not supported by Valentine's passage. You all saw the passage now, right? He says on that passage, captured all his females, right? The plural reference to all his females leads me to believe that it includes not only Sheikh Yusuf's wives and female children, but also those of his followers, his friends who were on the move with him. They were on the run with Sheikh Yusuf, right? In hindsight, we know from the list of passengers who arrived with Sheikh Yusuf's entourage from Ceylon to the Cape, that 5 of the 14 followers were women. I consulted with James Armstrong. He's an international scholar of Cape slave history and author of many books in the field, with a query whether all females could have an inclusive answer, and he confirmed to me that the Dutch word "weiler" could mean either wives or females. So there was not just one person that was captured here. So now, although Francois Valentine admits this first exile to Ceylon, we see that he wasn't directly exiled to the Cape, but he first was exiled to Ceylon. Okay. He was exiled to Ceylon in 1684. He was about 68 years old. Okay, so now I want to show you 2 pictures of Sheikh Yusuf, if you can have a look at it. Look at this picture I showed you when he was about 40 years old, right? Now he's 58 years old, he's going to Ceylon. There's pictures of Sheikh Yusuf, and you can see when he's older, right? So I'm just showing you this so you can see the person we are talking about, right? So now when he comes to Ceylon, and I'm not going to talk about Ceylon because my talk is about Cape. He stayed at the Cape, right? So he stayed there for 10 years. He was exiled there for 10 years, and the numbers of his entourage increased. And they get increased because Sheikh Yusuf also marries a lady there, you know. So he also marries a woman there, and the other people could also have married there. So remember, there is also family in Ceylon. So now Sheikh Yusuf gets old and sick, and he writes a letter. And I'm going to show you that letter shortly, but the Dutch archive released a Dutch translation of a letter written by Sheikh Yusuf in Sri Lanka, in Ceylon, in Malay. He wrote the letter in Malay, but all we see is a Dutch translation of this letter in 1688, and that was at the autumn of his life, because now he was age 63 when he wrote that letter. When did the Prophet die? At the age of 63, right? So he was 5 years in Sri Lanka, and he writes this letter. So it was a Capetonian researcher, Sarah Jabri, who brought this letter to our attention in 2017. So it's not long ago, it's now 2022. It's the first time we saw the letter, was in 2017. And she quotes it in her research. So I'm going to show you the letter. This is the letter that the Dutch scribe had translated, and he wrote it out like this. And what this letter says, do we have a translation of the letter? This is the letter translated. This is the only thing we see that Sheikh Yusuf wrote in his own words. This short letter comes from me, Sheikh Yusuf, Joseph Taja, and I'm not going to mention all the governors' names, to the Governor General and the noble lords of the Council of Indies and Batavia. You now know that's in Indonesia, right? May God bless them with health, longevity, and prosperity. Now you understand why Uncle Kami said he was like a Mandela, right? Mandela was like Sheikh Yusuf, because he is still giving a blessing to the people who captured him. That said, I, Sheikh Yusuf, am weak and in a despicable state, moreover so old that it is difficult for me to stand for a long time. I am also descended from wealthy and powerful people who had many under their authority and were burdened with children and grandchildren. It thus pains me to dwell with such grief and discontent in a strange land. I acknowledge my guilt, and I regret over the crimes I have committed. I implore you for forgiveness in all matters, so that, as a the streets and return to Batavia, to Indonesia. I warrant that your mercy and beneficence, noble lords, be repaid by the Most High, for I will never come to sufficiently repay this generosity. I have no one else to whom I can take recourse and refuge, and under the shadow of whose wings I can take shelter. So it was his wish to die in Indonesia, right? So what this letter uncharacteristically, because remember we don't have the original letter in Malay. This is a translation. Uncharacteristically claims defeat and admission of guilt on the part of Sheikh Yusuf, and even forgiveness, right? Despite these claims of ill health, the Dutch, instead of sending him home from Ceylon, extends its stay by sending him to Cape Town. Did they hope that he would die en route because he was already old and sick? No. Yet he lives for a further 10 years, 5 years in Ceylon and 5 years in the Cape, where he died. Although probably a genuine letter, a copy of the original letter has never been found yet. So still regarded as a threat, he is exiled further away to the tip of Africa in 1694. He is now aged 67, 68, and we show you there he comes all the way from all the places he's been to the tip of Africa. Right? So Sheikh Yusuf is not the first exile of the Cape. That is why we have all these kramats around the Cape. Right? Sheikh Yusuf is not the founder of Islam at the Cape. He's not the first person to have come here. But he was the only exile with a large entourage of 49 people that came with him on the boat. And he was the most learned scholar of them all. I told you all his qualifications, right? So he came with 2 wives, 2 concubines, 14 children, 5 of them were daughters. I found out the names and then we know it was 5 of them were daughters. 12 male and female followers, which could have been generals, they could have been friends or students, right? But they were female, 5 of them were female. And if you add all those numbers, then they come to 30. But we said they had 49 people. So Daniel theorizes that the rest could have been slaves or things. But I don't say that because Sheikh Yusuf, because they said when he went back, when the entourage went back, they said if they had grandchildren under the age, or if daughters had children under the age. So in other words, his sons and daughters were married here with spouses. They had family with him, right? They had children. So it could have been his grandchildren, sons-in-laws, daughters-in-laws as well. And we know, but you need to buy the book for all this. I can't give detail there. I was under the gate side, right? But I can tell you that those 19 people were not slaves, all of them, right? So now the project of Angola is Sheikh Yusuf comes here in 1694, in 1697.
Oh, sorry, we stopped the video because we have the next speaker also is about the time. But, you know, I just want to inform you that the presentation is so beautiful. It makes me so emotional. You know, narrating other people's stories, which is a very great 17th century Mandela. Thank you very much, Professor. The presentation is so beautiful. I am so emotional listening to the presentation. I think there are a lot of questions coming, and but unfortunately now we have to move to the other speakers here. The other speaker is wait a minute. We have Professor John Mason from Darwin University, Charles Darwin University. And I believe, I want to tell to the participant that we will be back later in the question session to Professor Najma Musa, and then talk about Sheikh Yusuf steps, and also now we have to give the time to Professor John Mason from Charles Darwin University. Now here we have Professor Jason, and I give the time to Professor Jason to present. Please, Professor John Mason.
Selamat siang. Thank you very much, Bu Astrid, and for the. I'm sorry I cannot participate in the whole conference, but I'm pleased to be here. So let me try some bahasa. So again, selamat siang semuanya. Saya senang bisa mengikuti konferensi ini. Semoga presentasi ini bermanfaat. Maaf, bahasa saya kurang bagus. So I will present in Australian English. I wish I could speak bahasa more fluently. And I can see that you already have my slides loaded. So maybe if you can just go to the, I will just speak a moment here for this first slide. So just back again, I'm sorry, on that first slide. The theme actually for your conference is very interesting to me. It is not my main academic interest, but I am in fact very interested in two things here with your theme: imagining a future society, where we are going, where humanity is going, how we are recovering from the pandemic. I'm also very, very interested in religion's contribution to social recovery. However, my slides are very much focused on technology, new terminology in the global context. And I've chosen to use this phrase here, Society 5, imagining Society 5, because it's new terminology that has emerged in these last few years from Japan. So the next slide, just back one slide, please. Normally at my university, we are trying to say a few words about our relationship with First Nations people in Australia, in this country. And we're also trying to rectify some of the wrongs that have been that have happened in the past. And one of the protocols that we like to do, and we like to do this authentically as we can, is to acknowledge the First Nations people across the lands on which we live and work in Australia, and we like to pay our respects to elders past and present. And I suspect this may also have some kind of meaning in Indonesia as well. And so the next slide, I just have a there's a photo there of some of the local Larrakia people. I'm living here in Darwin on Larrakia country. The Larrakia people have been on this country for 50,000 years. And this photo was taken a few years ago during a ceremony when there was a formal agreement conducted concerning some of the local lands. But the next slide is a photograph, is another picture, if you like, that's completely opposite to that kind of feeling that we got from that previous photo, which was, the previous photo really telling a story of history and resilience, of humanity engaged in deep cultural practices for a long time. And then all of a sudden here we are, we see these kinds of images in the movies, we're seeing them in magazines, in the media, these kinds of hybrid graphics where we have machines and robots partially resembling human features and partially resembling machines. It's quite a daunting kind of thing to imagine, but at the same time, it's also very real and something which we must deal with very quickly. So the next slide, please. Some of you may know about the big news item that happened a few months ago when there was someone working for Google, Blake Lemoine, came to a point in his work, in his research for Google, where all of a sudden, when he's working on an AI system, he pronounced that he believed it was hard to distinguish the AI system from a sentient being, and of course this caused all kinds of shock and a lot of discussion in the media about this statement about sentience, about machines having sentience, and I thought, well, this is a very interesting topic to pursue. I wish I was in Makassar with you at your university to have longer conversations about this, because it's a very, very interesting theme when we start talking about consciousness and machines and the nature of sentience. Of course, sentience is very much the area that religion is concerned with. So next slide, please. We have lots of books out there that talk about similar things, and some of you may know of the author Yuval Noah Harari. He wrote a very significant book some years ago called Sapiens, that traced the history of the various human races on planet Earth that goes back many millions of years, and quite an important book and an interesting book. His book was very much concerned with a long view of history, and this is one of his follow-up books, all about the future and a brief history of tomorrow, Homo Deus, and it's very much a book that's concerned with the fusing of human beings with machines. You know, a hybrid kind of a future where artificial intelligence and genetic engineering are becoming just very much part of who we are. The kinds of ways in which we engineer our own smartness, for example. Next slide, please. Also, another recent book all about the convergence of the same theme, the convergence of human and machine, and in this book, Catherine Ball also talks about, if we just hit the key there to the next point she makes, it's like the next slide. If you just hit the key there, if you please just hit the next slide. Yeah, there we go. So she's saying that the next industrial revolution will not reach its full potential for the planet and people unless we all care enough. And there's a very interesting theme coming through here, which is very consistent with all the conceptions around Society 5 and a future in which we're starting to imagine humanity having a little bit more control as we go forward into the future. Next slide, please. So then, just as an example about the power of artificial intelligence, I came across this interesting tool not so long ago. It's a text generator, an artificial intelligence text generator. I've been using various AI tools for some time, and in fact, I think we're using a tool today in Zoom for the closed text captioning. We are already using all kinds of artificial intelligence tools, but I thought I'd show you a demonstration of what happens with this tool that is very, very powerful. And this is the way that it advertises its power when you go to the website. Say goodbye to the blank page. And so if you just hit the next arrow on the keyboard, you will see. I asked this AI program to present, to provide me with a paragraph that covered those 2 points, those first 2 points. And you can see there that the 2 options that the system has provided me are examples of well-formed English. The output is very easy to read. It's very clear. It's well structured. It makes sense. So when I did this, and this really only took me less than a minute to produce this, I couldn't help but think this has very, very big implications for the way that we conduct assessment in higher education and also in school education. Because if I can do this, I would say many students out there have been doing it also, and they know how to do it. And there are many tools just like this one, just like copy.ai, that can produce well-formed text just from a few key ideas. And the challenging thing here for educators concerned with academic integrity, concerned with trying to develop good habits with students, trying to teach students not to cheat, not to plagiarize, is that we have this tool that can produce such good text that we have no way of detecting whether in fact this text has been produced by a machine or by a human. So this is one element of the future which is exercising my mind as we go forward in a new era. I believe we're entering a new era here with AI and what it can do. So the next slide, please. So thinking bigger pictures, and we just click a few times there. I'm thinking about timelines and terminology here, and the next slide is a photograph which was only taken a few months ago. But it's a photograph. We are told this photograph reaches back into the very beginnings of the universe, and it documents an event that is 13.7 billion light years away. And so when I think about this, this is about the biggest picture that I can come across, and it really makes me feel insignificant and small. And what is happening in 2022 is really of not a lot of consequence in some ways when we're thinking about the expanse of the universe and what has happened in the cosmos so far. So I just put that there to remind ourselves of how big our big pictures can be. So then moving forward, I just want to talk now about some timelines and the various ways in which we can depict timelines here. Here's a few examples, a brief history of the digital revolution. We can look at a timeline of Asian history. We can look at a timeline that distinguishes between prehistory, that is 3 million years before the Christian era, and history from about that time to the current contemporary age. Lots of ways in which we can think about history and change and time, and I actually find it quite enriching always to dip into a little bit of history and to try to think in larger timelines. I also get very stimulated when I'm flipping through a magazine that shows the latest photos that have been taken from telescopes in space. So moving on, I'd like to then share with you the timeline, a common timeline, the next slide, the common timeline that depicts this idea of society one as as a hunting society, the very origins of human beings, moving through to an agrarian phase and an industrial society and information society, and now to this idea that we're just moving into this society 5, this idea of a super smart society where there's a lot of digital transformation going on. We hear about phrases such as the 4th industrial revolution, a revolution that's powered by artificial intelligence, technologies like blockchain, the Internet of Things. And so this terminology has been coined from someone in Japan in the last few years, and it's a very, very interesting, useful timeline for us to think about the various eras and the point in time where we are at. Sometimes when I'm teaching with my students, I talk about 3 phases of the evolution of the web itself, and so sometimes I talk about the transition from search to social to smart. So very much we are in these early years of a smart society where there's so many smart things about us: smart cars and autonomous systems and smart fridges and smart devices, all kinds of smart technology. I guess it begs the question, how smart might we be in catching up with these developments? How smart can humans be in this situation? So the next slide, please. Terminology. We keep on going through the slides. This is what I'm focusing on. If we look at what the think tank Gartner has to say about the top strategic technology trends for 2022, and we go to the next slide, it's quite interesting here. It's very interesting for me. I'm aware of some of these terms like generative AI and autonomic systems, but there's many other terminologies, very many other phrases and terms here they're quite new to me. This is terminology that's coming out now that describes the IT industry and how many facets there are to the IT industry as it is advancing before our very eyes. Ideas down here like cybersecurity. We know about cybersecurity, but cybersecurity mesh and data fabric, all these new terminologies are very, they might sound like cute new terms, and sometimes they are, but it seems that some of this terminology will stick around for a while, and we need to learn about that as we go. So if we keep going to the next slide, we have other depictions of futures of the digital infrastructure. Here's another one from IDC where we're looking at autonomous operations all the time and cloud native technology, ubiquitous deployment. It's a kind of a strange new language that's associated with advances in information technology. Next slide, please. And when we look at just artificial intelligence, all these terms represent different aspects, different facets of artificial intelligence, whether we're talking about machine learning or chatbots or pattern recognition, neural networks, autonomous robots, cognitive cybersecurity. There's many branches of artificial intelligence that are emerging in the society that's happening at the moment. Next slide, please. Another representation here is all about the Internet of Things and how not only are we developing technologies across all these domains, but the technologies are starting to communicate with each other. You know, our home appliances, we can communicate with our home appliances from our workplace. This is becoming commonplace. Next slide, please. So in my own research, these are the sorts of keywords sometimes that I've been looking at or get generated when I've been looking at Society 5. We can see here ideas of linked data and resilience and digital twins, surveillance and privacy, trustworthiness. Lots of different words here are starting to coalesce around this idea of Society 5. Next slide, please. But this is all happening in this context where we have many important global agendas, and particularly this global agenda which is being prosecuted by UNESCO ever since 2015, the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, number 4 is all about quality education. And if we dig deep into what that means, it also means education for all, being able to provide education right across all societies, right, all around the world. It's a big goal. It's likely not to happen. We had the Millennium Development Goals at the turn of the century, and we didn't achieve those in 2015. It's good to have goals, good to try to aim for these things, but whether we achieve them or not is another thing. The important thing, though, is that I think one of the consequences of the pandemic has been that there's the way I see it is that there's a lot more willingness, a lot more receptiveness for things to do with sustainability. I can see a big impact now on public policy with anything to do with sustainability, because the pandemic has reminded humanity that we're biological beings, and we do need to think about sustainability moving forward. So then, there's a slide here. Also, I wanted to share with you, thinking about technology and to think about the sorts of intelligence. So just to think about that term, intelligence, the way we use intelligence when we think about it in the digital environment these days. We know about the importance of big data and how that has emerged in this last decade. So we have ideas here around data intelligence, what we can learn from data, what we can learn from artificial intelligence, advances in computing power. But then what can we learn from collective intelligence? This is a sort of intelligence that we might aggregate from collaboration and cooperation with groups and communities, crowdsourcing systems, smarter crowdsourcing tools. So when we dig deep here into what a new intelligence paradigm might be moving forward into Society 5, then we're starting to see these different aspects of intelligence being described. And then lastly, embodied intelligence, also associated with artificial intelligence, but it's more to do with autonomous systems and unmanned aerial vehicles, those kinds of things. Next slide, please. In imagining in the future, we also in Australia have a research agency here called the CSIRO, and it has also been producing reports every few years or so. And this is its most recent report about our futures, as we imagine our futures. And these are the kinds of things we need to be thinking about: adapting to a changing climate, leaner and greener, escalating the health imperative. Of course, that's come from COVID, the challenge of geopolitical shifts, diving into digital, increasingly autonomous, and unlocking the human dimension. This unlocking the human dimension is really all about, we could say, Web 3.0. It's bringing humanity back into the driver's seat of where we're going. Next slide, please. So we're starting to see slightly different depictions about the fundamentals of learning, the fundamentals of teaching and learning, where we're often talking about knowledge and skills. But we're starting to see these models here talking about the 21st century learner, someone who's combining knowledge and skills and character, as well as meta learning. So this idea of four-dimensional education. Moving forward, we have depictions like this from the World Economic Forum. That this model here is about 7 years old now, but it's been a very, very useful one. I've found it to be a very useful depiction of 21st century skills, separating the foundational literacies from the core competencies and the character qualities. If we just highlight the next, click on the next arrow, we'll see that down the bottom there, that's very, very relevant to where we're going with Society 5, are these kinds of literacies, if you like: cultural, intercultural literacy and civic literacy, global citizenship, social and cultural awareness. Okay, these are the sorts of things that our students are really needing to know about and to become empathetic with. So the next slide. We also have representations from the OECD that for many years have just talked about knowledge, skills, and attitudes. We're starting to see that the models developed by the OECD talk about knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values. Next slide. I'll go through the next few slides reasonably quickly because I'm just mindful of time. But here we see a shift in recent years from the OECD. We start to see representations here of the knowledge, skills, and attitudes, and at the very middle of this, we see we're seeing things like data literacy alongside literacy and numeracy, and these things working together to connect with the well-being, not just of the individual, but the well-being of society. So this is a shift in language. It's a shift in terminology as we move forward. Next slide, please. And so we have this idea of the OECD Learning Compass 2030, and you can see there the 4 points: knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values, all working together in this environment, trying to achieve a goal that's very much associated with well-being and very much driven by student agency and co-agency with students and teachers and parents, communities all working together. Next slide, please. And so digital citizenship is a facet of this emerging environment. We're no longer just talking about digital literacy. Digital literacy is just one aspect, but learning to be a digital citizen in a global environment, not just the local environment. We need to connect the local and the global, and so we have representations like this of all the different aspects of digital citizenship that we are needing as educators to embrace, and we're needing to teach about. We need to get skilled up. We need to learn about this stuff, and we need to ensure that our students are learning about these kinds of things. Next slide, please. So there's a link there to a very good video which I'd encourage you to have a look at to feed your imagination about what Society 5 might look like. Next slide, please. But of course, here we are in a world like this. If we just keep on clicking the slides, we'll see a series of photos here. If we keep clicking, please. Yeah, there's a lot of, in fact, this is the other side, of course, of the world we're living in at the moment. Technology and advances in human history are also, unfortunately, coloured by these sorts of events and this kind of conflict. I'm not sure how we can get past all this, but I'm sure that religion has a very, very important role to play to navigate our way through such conflict. But this is something that very much disturbs me and challenges my thinking. It'd be great if we could think that technology was going to solve all our problems. The technology can certainly solve some of our problems. Unfortunately, it seems to create problems as well, because we have a whole, the globe, the whole world is full of technologies that can destroy us. So this is just an unfortunate reality. We need to think through ways in which we can find in which we can shape futures, create futures in which the technology is serving us, serving all of us on the planet, and not perpetuating conflict. So moving forward, just another depiction there. But so moving forward, yes, a more optimistic view then is this idea of the next generation internet, where we don't have so much misinformation, we don't have so much conflict on social media, and this is a project that's been driven out of Europe over the last few years. The next generation internet. I like the three key words that describe it here. It's all about being resilient, trustworthy, and sustainable. Next slide, please. So then here's another summary of this transition from Society 4 to Society 5, and that we're very much in the fuzzy area of transition between all of this. But this is the kind of terminology that we're seeing as we transition from these different eras, if you like, of human civilization. Of course, none of these depictions talk about the downside story, the dystopian story of human conflict. But this is something that I think we must deal with very, very skillfully. So moving forward, then there's plenty of books about thinking about the future here. Here's another one I recommend, but I'm mindful of time. I want to get to a question or two if I can. Moving forward, one thing that I've found quite inspiring from your country in recent years is the recent policy initiative all around Merdeka Belajar, and in many ways I see what is happening with this policy is something that's quite inspiring, and I'm watching what will happen in Indonesia over the next few years with a lot of interest. Next slide, please. And so then, just to finish, some of the questions that occupy my mind: how do we solve human conflict? How do we build a better intercultural understanding? And what are the next human smarts? How can we become smarter, as smart or smarter than the technologies that we're deploying? And can we achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals? So then just one last slide, I think. Okay, so this is the theme. These are my closing thoughts here. I think these 3 dot points probably sum up the sorts of things that I've covered today. I think my understanding is that moderasi beragama is all about the importance of moderate views with religion, and so that we can have religious dialogue and interfaith discussions without too many fundamental positions. And then in education, I see very much that student agency and well-being are the key words that guide the way I'm thinking about teaching. And then questioning. Questioning is my big research area. Actually, I'm so interested in the role of questioning in student learning, but this big question here: what is it to be human? So, possibly too many slides today, but I hope that's been some kind of small contribution to the discussions that you might have at your conference. I'm sorry I cannot be there with you to have longer conversations, but at this point, I just invite any questions that anyone may have, please.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. Oh, sorry. Thank you so much, Professor Jason. That's very comprehensive presentation and very inviting. I hope from the participant will raise some questions. I really interested in the last presentation, the question about what is it to be human? It reminds me for one of the Islamic scholar called Al-Ghazali, and then in his book, The Chemistry of Happiness, The Alchemy of Happiness, he mentioned about the foundation of methodology in learning is about question about what is human. It is the human who question himself before question outside of the human. So I think this is very interesting that for myself, I will explore much about this. I mean, it is the human should asking about who is he before question outside the structure outside the human, because the human also composed from many structure. There is the soul, there is the thought, and there is also the human body. I hope the participant will. Is there any participant will raise some questions? Halo participant, apakah ada pertanyaan regarding the presentation? The first, izinkan saya untuk meng-highlight, men-summary the first presentation. Presentasi pertama itu berkaitan dengan perjalanan Syekh Yusuf. Saya pikir itu sangat menarik dan saya sendiri punya banyak pertanyaan berkaitan dengan hal itu. Dan yang kedua berkaitan dengan teknologi, society, masyarakat, dan berkaitan dengan kita mendapatkan informasi sebelumnya tentang berkaitan dengan revolusi industri dan kita berada dalam revolusi keempat. Sekarang yang dipresentasikan oleh Profesor adalah adanya revolusi kelima ya, masyarakat kelima. Dan saya untuk pertama kalinya baru saya dengar hari ini berkaitan dengan masyarakat Society 5. Ya, saya rasa ini penting sekali kita renungkan kembali berkaitan dengan bagaimana hayalan-hayalan para intelektual PBB akan dikemanakan masyarakat berkaitan dengan ekologi, sustainability. Tetapi pada kenyataannya yang terjadi adalah peperangan. Paradoks ya, antara apa yang kita lihat di dalam teori bagaimana pembentukan masyarakat dan sebagainya, tetapi apa yang kita lihat adalah adanya peperangan. Saya harap ada partisipan yang ingin mengajukan pertanyaan. Jika tidak ada, maka saya akan mengajukan pertanyaan. So, I have a question, Professor.
Terima kasih banyak.
May I speak Indonesia?
Please. But Tapi, you will have to translate for yourself also.
Okay, let me try to speak English. About smart and the development or smart city or any smart things, especially smartphone. In Indonesia here, smartphone is quite a problem within the family, within the student, within education as well. I think, in my observation, I saw there are many students forgetful. They don't have their focus anymore. The memory is less and less because their smart is not inside themselves, but they move their smartness, their smart outside themselves. So they really dependent on the memory outside themselves. And then they forgot the memory inside themselves. When the electricity off, when we have blackout and the phone cannot turn on, I think most of people become not smart anymore. What do you think about that?
I think you have described that situation very well. I agree with you about that problem, and I also see this problem with IT, information technology. It is also an interruption technology. It is also intelligent technology. Many kinds of IT. But I think the interruption technology causes a big problem because we're losing ability to concentrate, to listen carefully, to be part of a conversation with somebody else, to listen with empathy, to understand, to hear the other person, and to concentrate on a topic. So sometimes I think for many years now we've been talking about 21st century skills and the 4 C's, of critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. Sometimes I think we need another C. We need the 5 C's. We really should have C for concentration. Our schooling system should teach us. We should spend time with developing concentration powers again. It might seem like an old world, but I think it's a very human capability which we shouldn't forget how to nurture. So thank you for your comment.
We also have here someone raise his hand.
Yes?
Participant here will raise some questions.
Okay.
Silahkan.
Yeah, silakan.
Silahkan, Pak Nasrun.
Cek. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Nasrum, one of the participants in this second international conference.
Yes.
I'd like to ask a question to the first speakers, Professor Najma Musa, about Sheikh Yusuf journey from Makassar to South Africa. As we know, Sheikh Yusuf has 2 graves, which we can find in Goa, in Makassar, and then the other one is in South Africa. So, what we call it? Yeah, it is confusing and it is amazing because one person has 2 graves. As we know, everyone should have only 1 grave. Yeah. As I ever heard about the story of these graves, the real grave is located in South Africa, and whether the grave in Makassar is only contained about the accessories of Sheikh Yusuf, including the turban, the lock, and the other accessories. And the real corpse is buried in South Africa. That is the story that I ever heard. But Professor Najma Musa, would you like to explain scientifically whether you ever heard this kind of story, whether you know well and deeply about this kind of case of the grave of Sheikh Yusuf? Okay, that's it, my question.
Okay.
Thank you so much for the answer. Wassalamualaikum
Okay.
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih. Can I answer that question now? I will answer the question. So very interesting. Yes, we know for sure that Sheikh Yusuf, when he died at the Cape, he was buried here for 5 years because his family stayed on for a further 5 years. So what we do know that for sure, right? So the Dutch records say, indicate that when the Raja of Goa asked for Sheikh Yusuf's bodily remains to return to Indonesia, the Dutch initially said no, but afterwards they changed their mind and they said that should the family wish to take the body, the bones back, and they would be allowed to do so, the Dutch would turn a blind eye. So nobody is very sure of what exactly happened. But the Reverend Francois Valentine that I spoke about, he had recorded in his diary that he gives a good approximation of the number of bones in a human body, and he said that it was decided that the bones remain in South Africa, so that Sheikh Yusuf, because he was in Africa and he had gone through so much pain and trouble already, that the body would remain in South Africa. So there are two different versions. Some versions say that only a finger of Sheikh Yusuf may be buried left behind in the Cape, and they took all the rest of the bones away. So there are different theories about this. Nobody knows for sure, but what we do know that when somebody dies, they are normally buried in the place where they are buried. So we would think that Sheikh Yusuf is still buried in South Africa. But some scholars indicate that there is proof in Dutch records that his body was exhumed and the remains was taken over to Indonesia. But for that story, we can never really be sure, because the Dutch reverend that I told you about, who's written a lot about the Cape history and of Sheikh Yusuf at the Cape, he indicates that the body is still at the Cape. So yeah, but for sure Sheikh Yusuf was buried here for 5 years, and one would think as a Sufi Sheikh that he would be content to remain in the place where he died. So we accept then that there are more than one places of burial, because it is said that when his family returned to Indonesia, that his remains were taken with and he could be buried there. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much, Professor. Now here in the chat room, we already have question for Professor John Mason. The question is from Alam Jaya. Do I have to translate it? Do I have to translate the question?
Okay, I could not unmute. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, no, you don't have to translate. I think I understand something about many changes. We know the curriculum changes all the time. In Indonesia, the curriculum changes. In Australia, the curriculum changes, always changing. And this happens all around the world. And of course, our attitudes also are changing, and I think the sorts of things that I was trying to point to when discussing Society 5 and where the curriculum might go in the future is we have to embrace new terminology. Always, we need to embrace new terminology in the society of our time. The society of our time is talking about many smart things, and so we need to embrace those things. And probably, I think the big challenge for how we can apply these changes is our challenge is to become wise and to draw on our experience and to help shape the evolving curriculum with the deep human potentials. You know, we were discussing before about concentration. These kinds of inner human qualities we need to bring out. We need to develop and nurture more these kinds of human capacities and integrate them into the curriculum, I think. If I understand the question correctly, something about that.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor John. I think we don't have any more questions here. And then I see that some participant asking about the paper, the presentation. Is it possible, committee? Okay. So I will inform to the participant that the paper is possible to have. And I think we don't have much time anymore, and thank you very much to Professor John Mason and also to Professor Najma Musa. We really thank you for your sharing here, and what else? And I think that's all for today. And the information and the knowledge is truly new for us, and then we are really excited to learn more about this. And I think that's all for today. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Professor. It was good meeting you as well.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for having us, and we appreciate it. And you have a good day ahead, inshallah.
Yeah. Likewise, I would like to echo those sentiments. I also wish to thank very much Professor Mardan and Bu Nisa for all the effort in communicating with me before the event to make this happen. I feel very honoured to participate in your event today. I just wish I could have longer time to speak and have